And it's time for our Worldview with ABC's Inez de la Quatara. Let's start at the Vatican. Doctors are monitoring former Pope Benedict as the Vatican says the 95-year-old's health is worsening. Inez, what do we know about Pope Benedict's condition?
Good morning, Diane. Yes, some breaking news there out of the Vatican with Pope Francis talking about Pope Benedict's declining health. He asked for members of the Catholic Church to say a special prayer for his predecessor. He talked about how Pope Benedict was very ill and how his condition had been declining in recent days. There's not a whole lot that we know specifically about his condition. The Vatican did put out a statement confirming that Pope Benedict's health had been declining. They are saying the situation is under control for now, but that doctors are keeping a close eye on the situation. Pope Benedict is 95, and he's of course remembered for being the first pope in 600 years to step down. He at that time had cited his old age and had said he was no longer as fit, both physically and mentally, to continue leading the church. So he had clearly cited his health back then. Some new concerns about his health once again. But again, it's unclear just what specifically he's dealing with. I will point out the Italian news agency ANSA is saying that the Pope's health had been declining in the days before Christmas and that he'd been dealing with respiratory issues, but that hasn't yet been confirmed by the Vatican, Diane.
Meanwhile, China, Inez, has decided to scrap its quarantine policy for travelers starting January 8th. But as China faces a new COVID surge, the U.S. is now considering new restrictions on travelers from China. So what's the latest on all of this?
Yeah, so China dealing with a massive COVID surge right now. This after it completely backtracked on its zero COVID policy, which was the policy it had in place since the start of the pandemic, really. There were widespread protests recently protesting those restrictions. And so China has been, lifting restrictions, and that has resulted in a massive surge. Hospitals and funeral homes are reporting that they are completely overwhelmed. But it's hard to know just how many deaths are really occurring in China because Chinese officials have recently changed how they are counting COVID deaths. So on Tuesday, for instance, Chinese officials reported just 2 COVID deaths. And like you mentioned, China is also looking at lifting travel restrictions that would go into effect on January 8th. And that has countries around the world concerned because they're watching what's playing out in China, and they're worried that, there could be new variants emerging. So we've heard time and time again from experts that the more COVID spreads, the higher the risk that new vaccine-resistant variants could emerge. And so that's the concern here, is that as travelers, coming in from China enter the U.S. or other countries, they could be carrying variants like that with them, and that would certainly pose a big problem. So countries like the U.S., but not just the U.S., you've also got countries like Malaysia, Taiwan, Japan. They're all looking at possibly imposing restrictions on travelers coming in from China, things like negative COVID tests or proof of vaccination. Unclear what those restrictions would be at this point, but it would certainly pose a problem for U.S.-China relations, because if the U.S. imposes restrictions on travelers, even as Chinese officials maintain that the surge isn't that big a deal, that would certainly be a bit of a problem, Diane.
And Serbian armed forces, meanwhile, are on the highest level, they say, of alert amid some increasingly strained relations with neighboring Kosovo. Now, Serbs have erected more roadblocks in northern Kosovo, defying international demands. So, Inez, what's driving these renewed tensions?
Yeah, so an interesting situation there as well. Tensions flaring up between Kosovo and Serbia once again. So Kosovo actually closing one of its biggest border crossings because of protests on the Serbian side. And on the flip side, like you say, Serbia putting its troops on high alert. Kosovo, of course, breaking away from Serbia years ago, and Serbia has always been reluctant to recognize that. Tensions have flared up time and time again, but they are flaring up once again. And this was all kicked off by a kind of strange situation. It had to do with license plates. So Kosovo is requiring that ethnic Serbs living in Kosovo start using Kosovo-issued license plates. They had up until now been using Serbian license plates, and then the officials are saying that should they continue to use those license plates, they would be fined. That has resulted in mass protests and resignation, and so that's what kind of kicked off this whole thing, Diane.
All right, Inez de la Quatara, we appreciate it, Inez. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.